Shalom, shalom, everyone. This is Rabbi Moshe Otero, Ways of Israel. We've had an incredible weekend, 4th of July celebration. Most importantly, we had the opportunity to meet a young man from Texas who basically wanted to go through an Orthodox conversion, at least on a halakhic level, and we were able to do so for Mario, who was originally his parents from Chiapas. So I want to wish him mazel tov on him taking on this decision and being part of the community from a halakhic level. He did take a conversion. It was a conservative conversion, and then wanted to have at least an Orthodox halakhic conversion. So we welcome him to the community, and again, Yasher Koach for your decision. I wanted to share with you a little bit about the Parsha this week, the Parsha Pinhas, which is a fascinating Parsha because it really taps into from last week's Parsha, at the end of last week's Parsha, that deals with Pinhas and his zealotry, how he basically arose among the children of Israel and basically took a stand when no one else took the stand. And by that I mean that he was able to rise among his brethren, very well-known Kohanim, and basically raise the voice of difference. Now, it's interesting enough, I'm putting a note here in my video that in fact this is a revolution of a new norm, a revolution of a moral norm. Currently, our present norm is very similar to that of what existed back then with the times of the children of Israel and the Moabites and the Midianites, and the whole sense of immorality connected to their form of idolatry. It's nothing new, but what we do have new is the new applications through law to make the immoral legal. And many of you will probably be offended of what I say, mainly because you might take it as a hate speech. Almost everything that's being monitored and censored nowadays are things that, according to Torah value, you can't talk about because it will be considered hate speech. Yes, God hates sin. Yes, God hates immorality. And to even say and suggest that any group or movement today, basically with a rainbow-colored flag, is embracing tolerance to other people is asinine. It's completely ridiculous. What they're embracing is a sense of immorality that in biblical times it's very declared as immorality. I mean, and I'm saying to myself, where are our leaders? Where are our Jewish leaders? Where are the old preachers of past time that would speak against these things? We have none. And those who basically tally around the cloak of trying to have tolerance, love, brotherly love, so we can all get along, they allow and tolerate sin to creep in where clearly the Torah tells us it is wrong. Interesting enough, we read the story of Pinhas, who's a zealot, who sees how the words of the prophet Balaam in the ears of Balak basically comes and penetrates the plan, the dastardly plan to subdue the children of Israel to a curse by subduing them and seducing them by the very voluptuous women of the Midianites, who had in between their breasts the idol of Baal Peor, who when they cohabited with them basically embraced and united with Baal Peor worship. And interesting enough, Balaam knew this, and reason why this became an issue of contamination not only to the children of Israel, the regular folks, the regular Jew, but also to the highest leadership, the princes of Israel. To such a situation, when Pinhas saw this immorality taking place on a public level, the zeal of God, the love of God that he had, he took up the javelin, and he took and ran into the camp of the Shemonites and saw them doing their thing and pierced the spear between the personal parts, the personal members of their physical, biological parts, and thrust through the javelin. They really had something going for them when they felt that piercing through those two parts. As a matter of fact, as a result of the shock value, the whole entire camp didn't know what to do. It was completely startled, stiff, to see how one man, Pinhas, probably not a very big stature, was able to pick up these two individuals in the act of immorality, in the act of cohabiting, when no one else would rebuke them and tell them, hey, what you're doing is wrong. Because there was no voice for morality. No one represented God to the extent of seeing this as a great evil. We even read Moshe's word that the war was going to be placed upon Baal Peor. Nothing about the cohabitation. Nothing about the cohabitation. And yet we see in chapter 25 that Pinhas, the son of Aaron, the Kohen, and he stood up from amidst the assembly. He took a spear in his hand. He followed the Israelite man into the tent and pierced them both, the Israelite and the woman, into their personal parts, it's read. And the plague was halted from the children of Israel, and those who died in the plague were 24,000. Do you imagine that? 24,000 Jews or Israelites died as a result of their involvement in immorality and in blatant idolatry, embracing these women. And we read a part prior to this passage that in fact is the reason why we are prohibited in a lot of areas of social camaraderie with the Goyish world. It has to do because of the elements that's presented in this passage. That they basically use food, wine, and camaraderie to bring the Jews into their tents and seduce them in sexual pleasures. As a result of that, they attached themselves to the idol that was between the chests, between, hanging from the neck of these women, in between the breasts of these beautiful, voluptuous women. Now, the problem isn't that there's beauty. The problem is that they enticed and used that beauty in order to seduce these men to worship Baal. Interesting enough, God declares a war against them. Why? Why is this taking place? Why is he calling a war? And he says very clearly in verse 17 of chapter 25, harass and smite them. Literally, zaror. It's a commandment. There are two commandments here we're told by our rabbis that are contained in this passage. The first is consider the Midianites as enemies and to express them by harassing them and causing them distress. Here we have some weapons of war that those who are against the new norm, which is morality, which is basically not issues of immorality we have to fight. This current generation is a generation immoral that embraces all forms of sexual choices, as it were. And yet we stand behind, looking at the rainbow color as being something of tolerance and harmony, when in fact the yellow colors, the rainbow colors that represents the ark of the pact that God made with the children of Noah, is a reminder not of blessings, but of God's promise not to bring punishment upon the world with water again. But he would bring punishment in other ways. So every time you see that rainbow color, remember, it's a reminder. Quote, it's a reminder of God's wrath holding back upon humanity because of its immorality that he had to destroy the earth before. So when you see that rainbow color, it perfectly depicts the LGBT community and what they have represented. My friends, Obama, since making that entire movement legal, we have encountered nothing but plagues in this country and curses in this country as a result of that. You cannot say anything different. You can look it up in history and take a record of everything this country has undergone as a result since that declaration of making that movement a legal movement, and now, lo and behold, we see the results taking place before our own eyes. And once the enemy is within, it's very hard to kick them out. And this is what our Parashat this week talks about. I'm not going to argue with you about whether LGBT is good or bad. I'm not going to argue about that. The standards have been completely demoralized by our current leadership. We have no moral leaders in this country. We don't have voices that speak out against it because they all are afraid of repercussion by these movements that have become nothing less and nothing more than militant sodomites threatening freedom of speech in every which way, including here on Facebook and on YouTube. Verse 17 says, harass and smite them. Two commandments are contained in this passage. The first is to consider the Midianites as enemy and to express them by harassing them and causing them distress. How many times you see someone who's completely immodestly clothed, male or female, and we say nothing about it? We need to harass them. We need to go out and say, you know what? Get some clothes on. I put on a post on my Facebook pages. I don't want to see any nudity. Believe me, not that it's not appeasing or appealing to my eyes, just the opposite. It draws my eyes. It draws a lot of men's eyes. You know what? But I don't need to have the problems it has connotations to. So no, don't post any semi-nude pictures on my Facebook. I'll erase you and I'll block you from my Facebook if I see it. I'll mute you, give you a chance to repair, but if you continue, I will kick you out. I will kick you out. There's no place in any type of space that's granted within a Jewish community to allow such garbage, such indecency. Where have we come in this country where we accept indecency of all levels and call it good? When the Torah very clearly says it's not good. It's not good for your eyes. It's not good for society. It brings a consequence to society and the damage thereof. So we need to embrace this new norm of morality. What am I talking about? I'm talking about we need to go back and take on the flag and take on the banner of what God says is right and stop promoting things that are immoral and cause immorality in our society. Yes, I'm talking about pornography. Yes, I'm talking about immorality both on a very low-key level as well as a public level. Harass them. Interesting enough, our sages say that the word harass means, soror means harass. It implies the ongoing state of mind rather than the instruction to do something tangible at once. This is also mentioned by Rashi. The second commandment is arachitem, to smite them. It implies actual warfare. Indeed, the people were later dispatched to attack the Midianites, to avenge what they had done and the plague that they had caused upon the children of Israel. Or HaShem explains from a deeper purpose of these commandments was not only to simply bring revenge, but under the leadership of Midian, a lust for immoral pleasure, a desire for the worship of Peor had been introduced into the Jewish people. Such desires are very hard to eradicate, as lust is in the constant danger of re-emerging. My friends, it's easy to seduce nowadays. You see more people with less clothes on in these public squares, in public social media. Even our own fellow Jewish women and Jewish men, they go around bowing around like if there was no sense of propriety, even in normal dress. The way to deal with such a danger is to make people understand that what they think as its tempting pleasures is in reality an enemy. An enemy that is a threat to the very existence of any people. And in this case, the Midianites, who had insinuated their debauchery, their immorality, their idolatry into the Jewish people, Israel had to become convinced that they had nothing to learn from them. Nothing new, my friend, is under the sun. Complete immoral depravity, which destroys families, destroys children's lives. And from this we learn that the Midianites were for a continual spirit of enmity against everything that's immoral. So how could it be? How can you be that we have religious Jewish people raising the flag of the rainbow flag? How could that be? Shame, shame, and more shame on the Jewish community for even allowing that, to being a voice for immorality when you should be a voice of light, of reason, of strength to the family. The task of punishing the Midianites was also necessary, but it didn't require a constant state of actual war. My friends, whenever immorality arises in any nation, it becomes an affront to the nation. It becomes a curse to the nation. If anything, we have seen our country basically stumble over one and another problem over and over again. Our leaders have also done the same thing. They have basically sipped the very beverage of this same problem that we read in this week's Parashat. I'll never forget a couple of years ago when a couple of Israelis that I was listening to were talking about their recent visit to local strip clubs, and that a whole bunch of rabbis had come to visit that strip club, and they were enjoying the whole entire debauchery of that moment. And it was a matter of laughter in many of the houses for Shabbat. Oh, it doesn't happen? Yes, my friends. New York, same type of debauchery taking place. Many Hasidic homes where basically you think, oh, such a Chumash home invited yeshiva girls to be able to have wild parties. And then we ask ourselves, what's going on? Where has our morality gone? Imagine that, swiping partners left and right like it's been a time of debauchery, like from the very first time. But no one sees it. No one wants to hear about it. And yet everything is known to God. God knows all of these sins that take place in the privacy of one's home. And then we ask ourselves, why are these things happening to this country? Why are these